it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Dad Plus Me and Totally Awesome. So I have stamped out all of my images on Neenah Solar White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my moose, and for them I'm using E53, E55, E57, and E59. And actually on the baby moose, I'm only going to be using the darkest three shades because there's so little room there. But I laid in those shadows with that E59 along the sides of the face and up under the head and then down the legs and on the belly as well. And then I began to blend that out with the E57. And then I'm going to fill in the rest of that space with the E55, just really making sure to scrub over the edge of that E57 and break up that pigment so that I get a nice transition from shade to shade. And then when I get to the Papa Moose, I will use all four shades with that E53 as my highlight. So I wanted to have a little story time today. So I was really struggling to come up with an idea for today's video, and my youngest son was in my craft room hanging out, and he was like, okay, I'll pick out a stamp set for you, and that's what you have to use in the video. I said, okay, I'll take that challenge. So he picked out this Dad Plus Me stamp set, and he was going through the different images in it and telling me what he wanted me to use, and I had to include the moose. And then he says, I have to preface this by saying that we have a very wet backyard, and so we have these tall reeds that grow with cattails. And he's like, I need you to use the corn dogs in the video. And I was like, what? The corn dogs? And he's like, yeah, the corn dogs, like, you know, those things that grow in our backyard. And I'm like, do you mean cattails? And he thought about it for a second, and then he was like, whatever. I just can't believe that he's 15 years old and thought that they were called corn dogs. So now for the rest of my life, I have to call cattails corn dogs because it's just too hilarious not to. But anyway, I just had to give him a shout out today because he totally saved me by coming up with the idea for today's card. Okay, so moving on to the Papa Moose's antlers, I'm going to use E50, E51, and E53. I laid in a little E53 on the underside of each of those antlers, and then I added just a touch of that to each of the top sections there, and then I'm blending that out with the E51, and I saved just a little bit of room there for that highlight with the E50. My next combo is going to be E44, E47, and E49. Going to color in all of the hooves for the moose with that E49, and then I'll use all three of those shades for the corn dogs. So I just added a little bit of shading with that E49, one on the right, one on the left, and then blended toward the center with the E47 and finished with the E44, and I'll do the rest of those off screen. For all of the grasses, I'm going to use G20, G24, and G28. I'll put my darkest on the outside edges where it's kind of like bending a little bit out, and then blend out with the G24 and use the G20 as my highlight. And I'm going to do all of these grasses with that same combo, so I'll just do these two on screen and then finish the rest off screen to save you some time in the video. I'm going to use those three dragonflies to add my pops of color on the card. So the first one that I'm doing is using a turquoise combo. It's BG45 and BG49. I laid the dark color close to the body and then blended out with the lighter color, and then I went back in and laid a bit more of the dark back in and just blended out the very edge. The next dragonfly is going to be purple, and I'm using V06 and V09, And again, just keeping that dark color close to the body and letting the edges be the light, and then going back in with the dark once again. And then my third one is going to be green, but I wanted to go with a much brighter green, so I'm using YG23 and YG25. Then I'll take my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and just scribble that off on the side to get it started. And then I'll dot over the eyes of the 3 baby moose to make them nice and bright and shiny again. And then I'm going to trim all of these images out with their coordinating dies. For my background, I've die cut the Stitch Mountain border out of some grout gray cardstock and added that to a piece of snow cone cardstock. And then I'm going to take the Magic Iris camera add-on and die cut that out. And I also did the little tab there. And then I'm going to grab my pokey tool to just help me release that out of there. And then I can pull up the camera die as well and just pop those pieces out. I wanted my background scene to actually be on the camera. And because that cardstock is so heavy duty, that center portion didn't want to pop out, and I did have to use a craft knife to just help with that. But before I move any further, I want to stamp my sentiment at the top of that camera while it's still nice and flat. So I'm using Hippo ink to stamp out "Hope your birthday is filled with," and that is from the Reveal Wheel Friends and Family Sentiments. And then on the little center portion that was cut out, I'm going to stamp the word "love." And I did stamp that down a couple times to get a dark impression, since that ink does dry back a little bit. And then while I have my MISTI out, I'm also going to stamp on the inside of my card, and I'm using some speckled eggshell cardstock for my card base. And I'm going to stamp a continuing sentiment that says "and lots of happiness." And then I'm using that little mountain range from Dad Plus Me on the inside. So the next thing to do is build my Magic Iris mechanism. So I've die cut 3 of the rings, with 1 having the flux capacitor cut out of it, 3 of the sausages, which I'm going to insert into the little slots and line up with the outside edge of that ring, and then 3 of those stabilizer pieces. So once I have those little sausages inserted and have them all lined up nice and straight with that ring, I'm going to grab some mini glue dots. I'm using the 3/16 of an inch size, which is the size that is recommended for this die. And I'm going to put 1 mini glue dot right on top of the little X that the die cuts into each of those sausages. So once I have that in place, I'm going to grab a second ring and line that up nice and straight. Make sure the stitching detail is facing up, and pop that down into place, and then flip over the mechanism. I'll add some tape runner adhesive to the back where those little marks are for the stabilizers, and then I'll add those stabilizers right over top of that, making sure that there is no glue anywhere that it shouldn't be. It should only be under those stabilizer pieces. Then I'm going to turn that so one of the stabilizers is pointing at me, and I'm going to use the longer tab that comes with the Magic Iris camera add-on. I'm going to add some very strong adhesive to the back of that. I'm using 2 little strips of score tape, and I'm going to line that up just to the right of that bottom stabilizer so that it makes a little upside down V shape. Then I'll grab my tape runner adhesive once again and add that to the stabilizers, but not too close to the inside edge. Grab my third ring and gently fold those stabilizers over. I don't like it to touch that stitching detail on the inside edge, so I go like right before that and fold it over gently, and then the Magic Iris mechanism should be working. I'm also going to grab that little overlay piece for the tab that has the little arrow cut out and add some tape runner to the back of that, and go ahead and line that up with the end of the tab. So everything is ready to go. And then I'll move on to decorating the front of my camera. I've cut down a piece of noble fir cardstock with the grassy border, and I'm going to add that down at the bottom of the camera. And then before I continue, I want to add that little lens ring that comes with the Magic Iris camera pull tab add-on. And I'm going to tuck that down behind the grass and just make sure that that is nice and center and flush and no adhesive is hanging over onto the inside edge. I'll add some more adhesive behind that little record light and then tuck a piece of dolphin cardstock behind that. And then I'm going to take another piece of dolphin cardstock and add that flash over on the right hand side. And then the shutter button and the top piece of that are with more of the cement gray cardstock and the snow cone cardstock for the top. I believe I called that grout gray earlier, but it was actually cement gray. But I'll have all of the products I used today listed and linked below the video in the description bar, so you can check them out there. So I just added that behind over on the left. And now I've got the little pond scene here that I have stamped using Lawn Fawn's mermaid cardstock. I'm going to add that right down in front, and I'll take some of the little cattails and start to stage my scene with those. I'll add a taller one over on the left and another tall one on the right, just to have things nice and balanced. And from there, I'm going to mix things up. So I'll have one of the smaller ones over on the left, overlapping that lens just a bit. And then I'm going to figure out where I want those 3 baby moose. So I'm actually going to be giving this card to my father for his birthday next month. His birthday is 2 days before mine. And there are 3 of us kids, so that's why I decided to use 3 of these baby moose to symbolize my brothers and I. So I'm adding 1 of those on the left and then 2 over on the right. And then I can fill out the rest of my scene by tucking more of these cattails in there and just making it look a little bit more full and interesting. So I have some that are kind of even overlapping the moose just a little bit and helping them be a little bit more hidden. And then some I'm going to add down behind. And then I definitely wanted to have at least 1 also on that inside panel. So I'm going to line that up how it's going to be in the end now, so that I can fit 1 of those in there as well. And then also add the Papa Moose. So I'm just using that tape runner adhesive since I had already been using it for the Magic Iris mechanism, and it just made things a little bit easier not to have to wait for anything to dry with the liquid glue that I normally use, even though it does dry quick. I had the tape runner already out, so I just decided to continue using it. So I'll just finish off that scene by adding some of those shorter grasses. And I'm going to do one that's kind of tucked behind the grassy border. It's not quite in that background panel, that little center piece, but right in front of it, so it'll kind of overlap that background panel. And I had to make sure that there was no adhesive sticking over that outside edge, or the Magic Iris wouldn't have worked. I had also stamped a couple trees from Mom Plus Me, but I ended up not needing them on the card, so I didn't use those at all. And then I'm going to add my 3 dragonflies. I put the green one up in the sky, so it would be farthest away from the grass. And then I added the blue and purple one down lower. So now I'm ready to add the Magic Iris to the back of my camera. So I added some tape runner to each of those stabilizers, and I'm lining that up with the tab in the top right corner and making sure I have that where I want it, and then pressing that down into place. Then I'll grab my card base and I'm going to add a piece of pattern paper from the Hello Sunshine remix. And I have die cut that with the Lawn Fawn outside in stitch rectangle stackables. So it's going to be just a little bit smaller than the card base, so I get a nice border on the outside edge, plus that great stitching detail. To adhere this to my card base, I'm going to add some more of that tape runner adhesive to the back of just those stabilizers once again, and then I'm going to line this up in the center of my guard and press firmly to adhere. Then I will open up the magic iris so that I can add some tape runner to the back of that center portion and pop that down into place. And at first I started from the top, which was not a good idea because I needed to tuck it down behind those grasses. So I used my pokey tool to pop that back out, and then I adhered it the correct way and made sure that everything that was down there was pushed below the magic iris. So at first it didn't quite want to close, so I just ran that pokey tool around and made sure that there was nothing that was getting stuck. And there you can see that magic iris in action. I never get tired of playing with these things. So I hope you guys enjoyed my Moose and Corn Dogs card. If you did, please be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. This card will actually be on the Lawn Fawn blog today, so if you'd like to check it out, I'll have a link to the post down below. And if you have a funny story about your kids calling something by the wrong name, I would love for you to leave me a comment down below. I think it'd be so fun to chat about it. If you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one of those to check them out. And I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.